Hi, I'm Jen Proud, and I'm going to be running through a demo called Canva 101 Visual Design for Journalists Who Don't Do Design. Now, I always like to start these types of sessions with the question, what makes for good design? A lot of people think you need to be artistic or creative or have super technical skills in order to create good design. But the reality is that it's really just about having a good story and having clear organization for how you want to tell that story. It's all of that made visual. So if we have a good story, we know who we're telling, and especially if we're the author of that story, being able to articulate it ourselves in a program like Canva where design is democratized can make the story even more powerful because we know that we can articulate it in the way that is going to be the best representation. Our session agenda is going to cover a few different topics. We're going to talk about staying on brand using brand kits and how to apply your brand when you're in the editor. So making it really easy to take something and get all of our brand components on the page with a snap. We're also going to be talking about how to use the template library and leverage templates in the editor. And we'll touch on how to use AI as well. And then we'll also give you a bit of a cheat on how to show your assets on mobile so you can check for things like text size and legibility. And also we'll look at the contrast ratios in the accessibility tool. And then we'll talk about publishing, how to make sure that you can get this out onto all of your favorite platforms super easily. From here, we're going to jump directly into the demo. So I'm going to hop on over to the homepage of Canva. Before we go through anything in detail, I'm just going to give you, a little bit of like a background on the environment that we're in here. So if you haven't been in Canva before, this is our home screen. You'll see that we've got some previews or thumbnails here for some recent designs that we've been working on. There are some shortcuts across the top so that we can very quickly start with a blank canvas. And these are in a number of different media types. So whether we want to work in something traditional like a sheet or a doc, or we want to start something more visual like a presentation or a video or a piece of content, we can jump into all of those right here, or we can start with something custom. I do like to always mention that the things that you can upload into Canva, it always impresses me. So if you have a PDF, just drag it right on into the editor and watch it get converted, and you'll be able to work with that in the editor, even though it was not created in Canva. It'll translate everything into live type. It'll translate all the shapes for you so that they're editable. And you can manipulate that PDF. So just because something started somewhere else does not mean that it needs to stay there. You can happily bring it into Canva and start to manipulate it further if this becomes a tool that you're really comfortable in. So besides the home screen, I'm going to go through kind of our left navigation here because this is where we're going to find most of our key elements. The very first here is projects. Now, while this isn't a super sexy feature of Canva, it is really important to make sure that at the beginning of our workflow, we really think about how we want to stay organized. So you can see here, I have a number of different folders. They're structured by name. I have a few of them for some of my different brands and sub-brands, making sure that I have the assets that I need all kind of contained in here. And then even within this, you can see I've broken it into templates and fundraising and brand assets. And even this one has some subfolders to that for photography icons and so on. Why it's important to stay organized is as we start creating more and more assets in Canva and we become more comfortable and we start resizing and learning how to use some of the more sophisticated features like bulk create, we're going to have a large volume of assets that are created very, very quickly. I mean, it's the beauty of Canva is that we can create things really super quick. So if we don't have a place to store those, or if those are stored kind of loose in the space, it does make it really hard for not only us to find them again, but also our teammates. So just like you would organize any of your other folders on your computer, start with some good organization here so that you're in a good place and you know where you can find all the things that you're going to need as you get rolling and you're creating these assets. You can also set different permissions for these folders for the folks that are working with you. So it's a great way to kind of organize not only your workflow, but make sure that you can share that across your team. We'll go down next to templates. This is where the large template library is. We'll come back to this in a minute, but you can see that they're organized by media type. There's some topics at the top that you can use as a filter, or you can just start scanning through. Where I want to start digging in is in brand, and brand kits is at the very top here. And you can see that I've already got some brand kits set up. And these are basically some of the shortcuts that allow us to start to document the key elements that we're going to need to stay on brand. So I've got my group brand here for On Now Group, but you can see I've also got some sub brands for maybe a sports division or news division. I've also got Elm Financial in here. So if you have advertisers that you're creating content on behalf of, you can upload their brand guidelines as well to make sure that anything that's being produced on their behalf is staying on brand and everything's centralized in one place. I'm going to go back here to our On Now Group, and you can see that there have been two logos that have been uploaded here. They're both in black. Because these are SVG files, they are vector-based files, which is infinitely scalable, meaning that you can stretch the logo as large as a billboard and it is not going to become pixelated because it does not use pixels. It uses a vector-based artwork. When you bring this into Canva, what's nice about having an SVG is that when you bring it into the editor, the colors then become editable. So we can just bring this in simply as a black object. And then when we bring it into the editor later, if we need to convert it to white, it is very simple to do that without having to go through a lot of complex editing. So I always recommend bringing your logos in an SVG format, not only for scalability so that they're always a high quality, but also for that color conversion. Below that, we're looking at brand colors. So you can see I have a number of them in here already. But it's as simple as just clicking on our color wheel here. We can name the color however we want, or it will automatically be named as the hex code for the color itself. We can either use the eyedropper and sample, or if we know the code itself, we can use the code to type in our hex if we have a brand guideline that we want to use. We can also add a CMYK value if we're going to be having colors that are going to be needed for both digital properties and print properties. So a hex or an RGB uses the color system that is built into the light display of digital presentation, whereas CMYK are the ink colors that are used for print. So we do need both of these if we want the brand to retain consistency in these colors. When you export out of Canva, thankfully it knows which one. So when you assign it print or you assign it digital, it will automatically apply those colors. So you should be all squared away, which is really what's kind of nice about setting this up from the beginning, is you kind of made those decisions and you don't have to think about it later. You will also notice that we have a gradient in here. So, you can add a multicolor gradient. So we could add more colors if we wanted, and then we can choose the direction, that we want that gradient to move. So lots of flexibility on what we can set up for brand colors. For fonts, we can add new fonts. We can upload fonts that we have on our machine or that may be part of our brand suite. Or we can select fonts that are available within Canva. There are tons and tons of fonts in here. So if you are building a brand from scratch or you need to find fonts on your own, I would always suggest starting with Canva before going outside, because there is such a vast library of typefaces to choose from. And what we can do here is, like I said, part story, part organization. So this is a great way for us to start to organize the structure of how we want to tell our stories, so that when we move into more of these visual pieces, whether it be a social piece, or a video or otherwise, we have some designation that's been predetermined around what we want a title to be structured like, how do we want subtitles to show up, headings and subheadings, and then section headers, body, CTA, and captions. And we can start to say, I want these to be bold. I want these to be a bit lighter. I want my body to read at the lightest. And I want my captions to always be in an italic. And these all have different type sizes as well. And we can choose these features like bolder, italic, so that when we go later into the editor, and I'll show you this when we get there in a bit, but we can basically already have kind of a shortcut to a lot of these decisions, and all of the folks on our team who are using the same brand have the same decision-making structure around how color and the logo and fonts are being applied in the pieces, which really helps us with strengthening our brand and the reliability around it. Going down the page, we can add brand voice. We can add photography. These can either be uploaded in, as you see here. These were just dragged right in. or you can upload them this way from a folder on your computer, or you can link a folder of photography that you may already have in Canva. So we looked at those folders a little bit earlier, and you noticed that I had already, see, here's our parent brand. I had brand assets, and I already had a folder of photos that I wanted to use. So I could link this folder. Yep. And now we have twice. But I've got folders here for photography. So if I had multiple shoots or multiple styles of photography, we could link all of those folders in here, and then we'd have a shortcut available to all of them. We can do the exact same thing with graphics and icons. So again, we can just drag and drop them in here, and they will be loose assets like this, or we can link to a folder. My preference is always linking to a folder, because then as new assets come to be, you can just keep dragging them into that folder, and they'll always update here. So you don't have to worry about sorting through and making sure that the right assets or the newest assets have been added. As long as the folders are staying up to date and things are staying organized, they'll continue to update in the brand kit, which is super helpful. Now at the bottom, we've got some additional colors. So because when we use charts, we have more data points a lot of times than we do brand colors, there's an opportunity here to at least start to choose what colors we want to show in some of our data visualizations, should we need more colors than maybe we have in our brand kit, or if they're different colors than our core brand, because we want our database to always have a certain suite of colors, because that's how we tell those visual stories. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the brand kits. And these are, like I said, a really great way to keep the team aligned around what the brand should look like. And I'm going to show you in a second how we can really leverage this once we get in the editor to apply our branding really super quickly and focus more on that story and organization and less on the design application and making some of these choices ourselves. So if you remember, we had looked at templates. So I'm just going to go back up here to templates. And we're going to look for a news post template. So as you can see, there's loads of templates here. And the Canva journalism page on canva.com has loads of templates as well. So if you haven't checked that out, please do, because there's some really great templates that you can leverage here as a starting place. So all of these, as you can see, I mean, some of them have false content in them. Some of them have this lorem ipsum. So these are all intended to be lifted, have new branding applied to them, and then be used as a jumping off point. Because sometimes starting with a blank page can be really, really, it can be really challenging, because we don't know what we need to put down. We don't know how big things need to be. We don't know what we want to include. But if we start with something like this, we can look for things that give us ideas about what it is that we want to create. Well, we're going to need our logo. It is going to be live, or it is going to have about 3 lines of copy, or maybe it has more and it is a quote and I need to include something like that. So looking here and kind of starting to get like a jumping off point is really super helpful. And there's a couple of things that we can do is, obviously we're going to open this in the editor in just a second here. But the other thing I like to point out is that if you like templates and you're finding them over and over again, you can always look at the same designer to go back and find templates that they're creating, because a lot of times their style is consistent across a lot of their templates, and you'll find different sizes, you'll find different variations. So you can click on the designer here, or you can follow them. You can also star templates that you really like that maybe you don't need right now, but you have something coming up and you may want to see them again in the future. You can star those templates. And then when you go on the left here and go down to starred content, you'll see all of the templates that you've saved. This is where you'll find those creators that you've saved. So it's a great way to start to catalog some of the things that we like as a jumping off point for later, as like a little bit of a cheat, which is great. So let's say we've got this template, we want to use it, we want to modify it for our own use. We can click customize this template, and now we're in the editor. So you'll notice that our menu on the left has changed. And when we click on the elements of the page, we also get another toolbar at the top that allows us to make changes to the element that we have selected. So we've got this photo, we've got some copy. Let's start to make some adjustments based on what it is that we want to create. So we know first we need our brand applied. So let's go to the top where we have this design tab here. You'll see there's more templates. So if we want to continue to add templated pages to this, we can, or we can jump over to styles where you will see our, list of brand kits. So we had gone in and we had seen this group of brand kits from the beginning. We want to select the one that we're going to use for this piece because this is a news piece. We want to make sure that we're selecting on now news. And you'll see there's brand fonts and color palette. I am going to click on color palette first, and you will notice that everything has been changed in the design to now apply my brand colors. There's a little shuffle button here. Every time I click this, it is going to rotate those colors for me until I get to a point where I am satisfied with the selections it's made. I can obviously continue to edit it further. If I want to see this in a different color, I can easily come back in and make some of those adjustments. But this is a really great way to just make sure all of our colors get to apply to all of the elements on the page in one go. I can do the same with type. So I can take my fonts, I can click on this, and you'll notice all of the fonts on the page again have changed. And we can make some adjustments. Let's say we want to go a little bit bigger, or we want it to be all capitals. We can still make those adjustments, but we now know that everything is technically brand compliant. Obviously the composition, we want to make sure that fits the brand as well, and the language and the story and things like that. But from a type and a color perspective, we've got the right pieces in play, which is great. The last thing that we really need is our logo here before we start thinking about how to swap out our content. So let's pull in our On Now News logo and let's pop it right here above. Kind of hide this other thing here. Let's bring it forward. And now we've got identification of our news outlet. We have all of our colors and all of our fonts. Now we can start to think about the story that we want to tell here. So let's start looking for some imagery to swap out based on our story. Let's say we're doing a story on New Orleans. So I clicked on this Elements tab here and I've typed in New Orleans. Oh, thank you for fixing my typo. So we've got some assets here for New Orleans. You can see they're grouped in a few different ways. So we've got some graphics, we have photos, we have videos, we have audio clips. So we have a lot of different things that we can choose from. This is a static, so let's leave it as a static. We can click on more photos and see, some of these, options that we can work with. Let's say we're doing a story on historic homes. So we can drag our photo in and you'll notice it automatically clipped right into space. So it fits in our space. When we double click it, we have the ability to adjust how it is cropped. We can go in and change our type here, or we can change the website. Things like that. We can even add a link here. If we click on more, we can add a link if we want this to become a clickable element that goes to the page itself. So we've been able to kind of do, within just a few minutes here, make sure this is on brand, swap this out. Obviously we didn't change our copy out, but that would be a pretty easy fix. And then let's say we want to try to, we want to use this as an Instagram story as well. So rather than starting from scratch and having to rebuild this or make a copy of it, we can go to resize up at the top. We can go down to social media. You'll see I actually have like a little suggestion here for an Instagram story, but I'll show you there's kind of some different categories here where we can pick what it is that we want to use, and then we can copy and resize. I don't want to resize this design because it's going to replace it. So let's copy and resize. I will open my story. Now, they're not always perfect. They do take a little bit of adjustment, but for the most part, we're in a pretty good spot here. So I'm just going to shuffle this down. We can make our type a little bigger because we've got the space now. Let's just bring these pieces down as well, just so we've got some room for breaking news. Okay. And let's grab both of these. And we're in a pretty good spot. Let's say we gotta move this up to the top here. But generally speaking, we were able to resize that pretty painlessly. And now we've got two. So we have our static that is in the other file, which I can pop back open in a minute, but we also now have a story, and you'll see that the format here allows for multiple tiles. So if we wanted to transition from one news story to another, we could very easily do that and swap this out, or we could even click on these three dots and we could duplicate this page and we could swap out our copy for the second. And we could change our image even to a different image here, right? And we could have multiple images and go between them. So a lot of flexibility. And then the other thing is that we need this to be moving, right? Because this is a story. So we want this to be engaging. We want to see some motion. We don't have a video element necessarily in the top, although we could. So we could take a video element and move it in there. And then we'd also get some movement from having a video piece, cropped into that top section. But let's say it was static and we didn't have that. And so we wanted to create something that had a bit more. Actually, I'm just going to delete this one because we'll just go back to this other one. Let's get rid of this page. Let's say we've got something static. So we really want to find a way to make this a little bit more engaging and catch folks' eye. What I really like to do is click on the entire page here. So I click on the bottom so you can see it's like highlighted with this like little purple highlight. And then I go to the top where it says animate. And my favorite way to animate is to use Magic Animate. I could select every element on the page and choose how I wanted it to move. But when I choose Magic Animate, it's going to make these recommendations for me. So it'll tell me what should move, how it should move. It'll give me some options. It has one here for bold, which I think is actually pretty nice. But it gives me some other options here too if I want something a little bit more elegant. That this one's a little bit less dramatic. We could do something really energetic or professional. So we've got a lot of different options here on what we can do. And it's going to apply, whatever we choose here is going to apply these animations to all of the pieces on the page. So let's choose elegant because that one is really fairly simple and I like that. And then we can click preview at the top and we can get a little preview of what our ad now looks like. So that's a great way to do that. The other thing that I like to recommend to folks, I mean, we are now using Canva in the app, but if you are in the browser and you need to test this, to make sure that it's going to be read appropriately on mobile and that it's going to be clear and that the text is going to be legible, what I always like to recommend is that you shrink down your browser window to the most narrow width. So I don't know if it'll work here. I'm going to try it. We'll see how it captures. But if we go to the most narrow width of the browser, which this is it for Canva, but let's say this was the browser and we went all the way in, that would mimic what your screen looks like. It's going to go down to basically around the same spot that a screen width is going to be. And so it'll naturally shrink this down and you'll be able to see what it would look like on your phone without having to send it to your phone directly. Now we can send it to our phone and see what it looks like. So I'll show you what that process would be. But if we want to do a quick check, as we're working on the design, we might have thought that the logo was a little bit smaller, that maybe these should really be bolder so that they're more legible. We want to make sure that our audience can read it. We want to make sure they can see who the outlet is. We can make some of those adjustments because we've looked at it at kind of the smaller size. Before I show you how to share this, the last thing I will show just on that note is there is under file accessibility. We can add captions to media pieces. We can check design accessibility, which is what I really like here, or reduce the motion if it's got a lot of motion that might be hard for sensitive folks. And then it's basically going to give us like a little audit of the contrast so we can see the typography meets the requirements and the color contrast meets the the requirements. It will give us some recommendations on alternative text for the elements on the page, because we always want to make sure that we have some sort of text there for folks who are using a screen reader. So some really great recommendations really quickly right out of the box with Canva. Cool. So let's say we're ready to share this. We need to get it to either one of our platforms. So you can see when we click see all, we'll get kind of a preview of all of our options for sharing. So this can be sent out as a public view link where anyone will be able to see it. We can save it or download it in a number of different formats. Like I said, it could be a video, or we can choose if we want it for print or email, things like that. And we can also post directly to our social media channels. So if you connect your Instagram or you want to schedule it to post on Instagram, you can do that as well directly out of Canva. So lots of options here on how to take this design now and bring it out into the world and share it with your audiences. Now, we've looked at this resize. I do want to touch on AI before I wrap up with this session, just so you can see some of the cool features that we can get with AI. But as far as using the brand kit, using the templates, getting into the editor with the template quickly, then applying our brand to that template, and then having the ability to not only utilize that template and fill it in, but translate it into another size so that we then have two pieces to publish. We were able to do all of that, really within, I mean, we're at 20 minutes or so on the presentation as a whole, but that was probably about 10 minutes or so of work. So if we take that time to set things up the right way from the very beginning, it can really speed up our workflow and our process, and we can get to that storytelling component and make sure that we have the visuals and the headline and the story nailed the way that we really want to be able to share it outwardly. So we'll go to AI. Before I close this up, just on that note of file hygiene, this is where we would name this file. Okay. This is where we would name that file, and we can move it or save it to a specific file. So this is where I would choose where I want to store my file here. So I can go to all my projects, or I can create a new one, and this could be, September stories. And now we've got it nicely organized so we can find it later. And then if we did want to share this with somebody on our team, you can see there's a way that we can add comments. So we could easily here also tag somebody. Before we get going. So great way to just wrap up a file as well and make sure that we've got it nice and neatly organized. All right, so let's go back to the homepage here. So I'm going to click on Canva just to get back to the homepage quickly. You can see I've got this little house tab highlighted at the top. Now, at the top of the page, we have this gigantic search bar, which is very powerful. It does lots of things. So it can help us to find our own designs if we can't remember where we stored it, which is why we talked about that earlier. So it will help you if you can't figure out where you put that file. And you can search for something that will help you recognize it. We can search for templates. So we can click on templates and make sure that we're searching within the template library for templates that we're looking for. Instead of going here, we can just do it directly from the homepage. You also have some great little shortcuts. But what I want to talk about is Canva AI. So when we click on Canva AI, there are some different options. And I recommend playing around with all of these. The way that I like to suggest this to people is don't wait until you are under a deadline to get into Canva and tinker around. Do a birthday party invitation. Do a planner. do your weekly planner in here for a week. Make a video for your own social. Play around with these features when you are not under pressure and when you can truly just kind of have fun with it, because the best way to kind of figure out how a lot of these things work, especially because there's so many fun features that do really great things, especially with the AI, it's better to just tinker around with that and really get an understanding for how to use it. And then when you come back later, it can make it a lot easier to jump in and figure out how you want to use it for a specific project. So there is Code It For Me, which will code actual small little applications for you. It can draft copy for you. It can create and generate imagery. We're going to design it for me though, because this one's truly the one that impresses me the most. There are lots of AI tools out there that produce assets for you that you then cannot edit. You just have to prompt them to death until they become what you need them to be. And the reality is that we just needed to get us started in a lot of cases, or we needed to fulfill part of the project. We don't need it for absolutely everything. So what I really like about Canva's Design It For Me is that it will then make the design editable for us in its end result. So we can give it some description of what we want. Let's say we need a social media post and we would like it to be a Facebook post. When I talk to AI, I always am polite and I try to be descriptive and give it some of my aesthetic preferences. So please create a social media post report. Week. I like it to be vibrant and modern. Okay. Does not have to be too much. We just want to give it some context of what we did identify this here, but I want to make sure that I say again, it's a social media post, what it's reporting on. So the context of what we want to talk about. And then I like to give it some cues on aesthetic value. So I want it to be vibrant and modern because we're talking about New Orleans, which is a vibrant city. So we're going to click on this arrow to hit submit. And it will give us some options here. So I really love that not only does it give us great results that are editable, but it also gives us a few options. So we don't have to just pick one. We're going to get a few that we can choose from based on what it is that we want to do. So we've got one that's in like more of a film strip style. This one's got more of like an illustration style. This one's really similar. They just kind of switched out the photo. Let's say we really like this one and we want to use this in the editor. Now we can kind of do exactly what we had done in our past design that we got from a template. We can go straight to design. We can click on styles. We can apply our type and our color. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to make this all cap. I'm going to bring it up like I did before. And then we can swap out the photo, or if we're really happy with what we've got here, we can keep this. And then we just need to add our logo in. So we'll go to brand. We'll go to our logo mark here. We can bring this in as well. And then, there we go. Let's bring this up. It's going to be a little bit bigger. We can change the color of this, like I mentioned, very easily. Just swap it over to white because it is SVG, and you can see it does not lose quality as we go up and down. Let's say I want to bring the spacing here a little bit closer together. Again, once I've selected on an object, the tools at the top will change based on what that object can do. So playing around here is another great place to tinker, but we can change letter spacing or line spacing to bring them a little bit closer together. And like I said, we've got all the shortcuts under this brand tab. So once you've clicked on brand, this is also where I guess we have to go probably to this other one. Hold on, to on now group, where we had links in folders. So you can switch between your brands within the same design not a problem. But we could go down to where those folders or elements were as a shortcut. And this would also take us directly into on-brand photography or elements that we want to potentially include on the page. Let's say there's a specific icon that gets used with stories like this. You know, this can get brought in. We can change the colors of this really easily as well. So really easy to then access any of those assets directly here. And then we can do the same thing we did before. Let's say this is going to also be a video asset. We can click on animate and we can just animate it up. So with AI, we did, again, kind of that same process, but a little bit faster, and we can continue to kind of play around with AI to get different results. We could have continued to prompt in that space and asked it for different feedback on, given it different feedback on how to, you know, evolve it forward if we had a different idea. Every time we come back now too, we'll also have those recent prompts that we asked for. So if we want to revisit it, we can always just come back and revisit that same prompt and give it some additional feedback and say, yeah, I want you to add a street festival photo here as well. So great way to be able to kind of jump through that really, really super quickly. Great. So we covered brand kits. I'm going to go back to the homepage here just to recap before we wrap up. So we went through our brand kits, which again are on the homepage on the left under brand kits. This is where we can set up all of our kind of core brand elements, templates, which is where you can kind of shop from this template library that's got a lot of really great options as a jumping off point that you can then apply your brand to, apply your content to. It starts getting you organized right away. Make sure that you're keeping things stored in these folders, in the projects. And then, like I said, you know, come in and play around and use Canva AI, see what it can do, push it a bit. You can also use it to create images, or generate copy. So it's a great way to start, brainstorming and, having some fun, you know, while you're not under deadline. And then when you do come in to use it for work, you can really start to move fast. Great. Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate you watching and have a great day.